So what do you need for a successful BACnet network integration? Well, there are at least three tools that you need. First of all, you need some BACnet devices that are going to send information on the network. So in this case, you either have native BACnet devices, whether BACnet MSTP or BACnet IP, or you need some sort of ways to convert whatever protocol your devices are talking into BACnet so that they can share the information with the BACnet network. The second thing you need is usually a router. If your network is not just one segment and you need to connect multiple segments with each other, then you need a BACnet router. And typically a BACnet router is connecting a BACnet MSTP channel with a serial wire to an Ethernet channel using BACnet IP. The third tool you might need is a way to connect the data that is living inside your BACnet network, not just with the BMS, where typically the BACnet data is ending up and being visualized, but also to the cloud. Now, we know this might not be common for every network, but these three tools, a BACnet gateway, a BACnet router, and a BACnet cloud connectivity device, are usually very common in many BACnet networks with a certain level of complexity. So today I'm going to talk to you about these three tools to help you integrate BACnet networks in the most efficient and successful way possible. Now let's start with the hardware. So we have a number of hardware BACnet devices and gateways. First, we have BACnet gateways, as we said. We have different versions of them supporting different physical connectivity options. As you can see here, we have one with one Ethernet port, another one with two Ethernet ports. Of course, we also have gateways for non-serial native protocols. For example, the KNX gateway that converts KNX into BACnet, or MBus to BACnet, or Loanworks to BACnet, or many other non-serial protocols to BACnet. These typically also have one port, one physical port that is to communicate the native protocol like KNX or MBus, and another serial port that is used to integrate into the gateway also typical serial devices like Modbus devices that you might have on your network. The last type of hardware we have are the wireless gateways. For example, this is the Wi-Fi version and this is the cellular and Wi-Fi version. These two are typically used by the cloud connectivity type of gateway, so the third option that we discussed in the beginning. And this is what is going to be called, that we call BACnet IoT gateway. So I'm going to show you very quickly how each one of these works, but first let me give you an overview on where they fit in the toolbox of a BACnet system integrator. So we have three main groups. The first group, as I said, are the gateways. The second group are the routers. And the third group, we call it IoT gateway. You could think of it as a cloud connectivity device that is moving the BACnet data from the field up into a cloud. So let's see from the protocols point of view. We have support for many protocols on the normal traditional gateways, starting from the most famous one like Modbus, of course, and KNX and MBus. Now, for these three in particular, we have a special version of the gateway called the Easy family of gateways. And that is because they have a special, very easy to use, very simple web interface that you can use to configure the gateways. The brothers of the Easy gateways are the normal FieldServer gateways that don't have the easy-to-use web interface, but are a bit more powerful for the more advanced type of BACnet networks and the more advanced type of protocol conversion requirement you might have in your integration. The second type of groups of products are the BACnet routers. In this case also, as you can see, we have the wired option and the wireless option as well, depending on what type of BACnet IP channel you have in your network. And finally, the BACnet IoT gateway is reading information from an existing BACnet network and it's reading it through BACnet IP, BACnet Ethernet, or BACnet MSTP, and it's then converting it into cloud protocols. And we support a number of them. The most interesting one might be, for many of us, MQTT, which is a very open standard type of protocol that is able to send the data into any type of third-party clouds. So this is a great tool that we have companies using it to populate their cloud system with the data that is coming from the field BACnet network. From the hardware interface point of view, we saw it in the previous slide, we have a mix of serial, Ethernet, and also non-serial type of interfaces. Where it is applicable, these gateways are all BTL certified. Now, the one that is not certified because it's not really generating any BACnet data is the BACnet IoT gateway, but all the others have the latest and greatest BTL certification. Now, the most special thing about the IoT gateway is that it is the only one supporting cloud connectivity. So that's the gateway that you might want to use if you want to connect the data that is in the BACnet network to a cloud, whether it's MSA's own cloud or a third-party cloud. The bottom two also support wireless options, typically Wi-Fi. IoT gateway also has a cellular option. And finally, all of them have an optional support for a cloud access into the gateway that is not really designed for moving the data from the field into the cloud, but more of a remote management capability that these gateways all have, and that allows a system integrator to remotely connect to the gateway and maybe update the configuration as needed, check that everything is running well, and there is going to be one special tool that is built in to all of these called the BACnet Explorer, which is basically a BACnet browser that is running inside of these gateways, and it is accessible remotely, and you will see that shortly in the demo. Before talking about the demo, this point of remote access usually brings up a lot of worries about security. What about protection against hacking? Well, MSA has developed what we call FieldServer, which is a suite of technologies and approaches that is maximizing the safety of the gateway and the cloud platform that the gateway is communicating to. We do this by having a third party constantly doing penetration tests. We have one regularly, and we have the report that they generate that is going to be public and shareable with any interested party. Because there is no really standard that is specifying the technologies and what in detail a gateway that is talking to the cloud should do in every situation, we have chosen one of the existing local standards, this California SB 327, which at the time of the development, a couple of years ago, was the strictest one of all those we could find. So FieldServer supports a number of low-level technologies like self-signed certificates, HTTPS, of course, using TLS 1.3. And also what was new with FieldServer was basically a mandatory password, very complex and difficult password. And the gateway cannot be accessed without this password at the first boot. You can change it, of course, later, but the first one, the first login has to use that password. And this password is not only written on the label on the product, but it's also written, or I should say, available as a QR code on that label. So now let's take a look at these products and see very quickly what they look like and what they can do. So this is the web interface that is actually running inside the gateway. You may be able to see here at the top the URL that I'm using to connect to this gateway. So this web page is actually being generated by the built-in web server in the gateways that are essentially very powerful Linux boxes. And in this case, I am connecting to this gateway remotely through the cloud connectivity option that I mentioned previously. So this is essentially a list of all the Modbus devices that this gateway is able to communicate with. And that is because we are looking at the FieldServer Easy Gateway Modbus to BACnet. You can see it up here. So here we see 4 types of Modbus devices that are connected to this gateway, and the data of these devices will be read by the gateway from these devices and convert it to BACnet. The way the gateway is configured and the way we are teaching the gateway how to read the data and what data to read from these Modbus devices is from this interface. So in this case, we see some basic information about the devices, the address type, for example, but then the most important bit is this, the data map. So in this case, we're telling the gateway, read from a specific address, like 40,121, and we're telling the gateway what is in that register, how to read it, and then this point will be automatically converted into a BACnet object on the other side of the gateway. Now, if I don't want to use this web interface, but I rather use, for example, an Excel table, I can. So by clicking here, we can now load an Excel file that is a table very similar to what is in the profile configurator, and then fill it in and then import into the gateway that Excel table that will generate these profiles listed here. Now, this list and this way of configuring the gateway is not just simple and convenient the first time I create a profile, but it's also very convenient to duplicate a configuration of a gateway, picking one profile, exporting the profile into a file, and then reloading it with the import button into another unit of Modbus to BACnet Easy Gateway. Of course, there are many other configurations here that I'm not going to show you. The only thing I want to show you very quickly is the BACnet Explorer that is going to be more visible later. Again, in this case, he is loading a different web page coming out of the same gateway through the remote cloud connectivity. And this is going to be a way through which a network integrator can connect to its BACnet network. Click on Discover, and then the gateway will show you all the BACnet devices and channels that it can see, in the same way as if you were locally on the field with a laptop using a BACnet browser, like Yabe, for example, and browsing the network directly on site. Now, this is very powerful, not just because you can see all the information that you would be able to see using Yabe, but also because you can do this remotely and it can be used at the same time by multiple users. So the gateway supports multiple users logged in at the same time, and this tool specifically can then be used by multiple people at the same time. And of course, there are no hardware keys to convert the laptop USB connection into, for example, MSTP. And there are no licenses to pay for the Windows program that you might want to use on the laptop. And there is no complications installing the Windows program in maybe laptops that have been locked down by IT. The second tool I want to talk to you about, as I said, is the BACnet router. Again, I'm going to go only into the main features here, but you can see here there is essentially something that requires almost no configuration except telling it what type of BACnet properties I want to use in the router. So I have two physical inputs on the serial side of the gateway using BACnet MSTP, and one or two Ethernet ports on the other side that can then output the data using BACnet IP. Once these network-specific properties are set up, the BACnet router is basically ready to use. Just one comment on the availability of and support of BACnet IP BBMD for the more complex networks. And since we're here on the BACnet router, I want to show you the page that we have for diagnostics. So what if you have an issue with the router or the gateway or the IoT gateway? Well, there is another built-in page, clicking here on the diagnostic link, that brings up this other page, also coming straight from the gateway. And there is a diagnostic link here. Now here you can automatically start a diagnostic procedure that will generate a file that you can then send to the FieldServer tech support, and with that file they will be able to diagnose in very, very deep detail what is going on inside the gateway, and therefore being able to either fix the gateway configuration if that's the issue, or give us hints about what happens in the network that might be caused by other devices. Long story short, this diagnostic page allows us to have a very, very quick turnaround on technical issues. And finally, of course, also the BACnet router has the built-in BACnet Explorer, as you can see here. And the last tool I want to talk to you about is the BACnet IoT Gateway. This is the main page where we can see a list of, in this case, 3 points that I selected out of the BACnet network that are being monitored and sent up into the cloud. I can send them up into the cloud, and I can also set alarms on each one of these points. Let me show you how. So the first thing you do is to go into the built-in BACnet Explorer and discover the network, just like we've done a second ago on the BACnet router. So in this case, we see the network, we see a number of devices in the network, and then we can choose which device we want to read in detail and do a deep discover of the data points inside. We call it Deep Explore. And then here we have a list of all the BACnet objects inside of this device. So in this case, this is a gateway. This dev IP is a gateway itself. And to the gateway are connected a number of electricity meters that you can see here. This H8036, PM5000, Socomec A10, and the Ion 7300. As I click on these BACnet objects, I can see the live values of the properties to the right, and you can see I can select then what value I want to monitor in my list. For example, this one, and we add it to the monitor list. Then this will show up as a new data point in the monitor view. And in this case, we can then set up an alarm. Now, you might see that in this list, one point, the first one, is in a warning state. That is because I have configured an alarm telling me this point has to have these values and not these other values. So let me show you. We go back into the monitor view, and to the new point we just added, we go to the right and we select the bell icon. This is where we can add events, we call them, which are basically alarms, warnings to data points. So we add one and we say, okay, I want to have an alarm, which is going to be red, when the value of this data point is greater than or equal to, let's say, 50, for example. And here I have a number of options. So we save, and then we see that this value is 124, the one we just added, Ion 7300, and because we set the limit at 50, this is now an alarm. Now, this gateway is then communicating these values into the MSA cloud at the moment, and then these alarms are forwarded to either email or SMS, depending on what you register in your cloud account. And I just received a message on my phone saying that this point is an alarm. So these points are being monitored, and the change from normal to a warning state, whether it's alarm, warning, trouble, and going back to normal, or for example the loss of connectivity of the BACnet IoT gateway with the cloud, will result in a notification, email or SMS to the operator. Finally, let me show you how the support for MQTT works. So we have a dedicated MQTT page that is also very simple, and all you have to do is to set the properties of the server to which the gateway will send the information, and that's all. The same way we can send information to our cloud, the MSA grade cloud, we can send using MQTT information to any third-party cloud that supports MQTT. That's all I wanted to share with you. These 3 tools that are essential into the tool set of any system integrator of BACnet networks. BACnet gateways to integrate into the network non-BACnet devices, BACnet router to build the infrastructure of the network, and BACnet IoT gateways to bring the BACnet data out of the BACnet network into the cloud for more advanced monitoring and visualization of the data. Of course, there's a lot more to each one of these products, but we don't have time to go through it today. You can find all the details you might want to know on the MSASafety.com website and in the pages dedicated to each one of these products on the website.